How's it, Internet? Today we're going to talk about why you should stop using linear workflows. I'm Mod Modlin. I'm a principal consultant at Mint Group. I'm a solution architect and an Uber nerd. You can find me online in various places. So, what is a linear workflow and why should you avoid them? So, to explore this, we're going to look at a case study, right? It's a very basic process. So user's going to capture some information and then that's going to go through a two-step approval process. Something I'm sure we've all built many times before. So if you're going to build this in a linear fashion, it would look something like this, right? We'd have our trigger, probably when an item is created in our data source, probably SharePoint Online. That'll then go through two steps of approval. We'd probably use the out-of-the-box approval action because it's really simple. And then it'll send a notification to the user or users, probably email or Teams, whatever that case is. Right? So the full list of components for this is we need our SharePoint list, which is going to have all the detail that's being captured. We're going to have a Power App that helps people capture that item. And then we're going to have a flow to actually do the approvals. And we've gone through the steps of what that flow will look like. Really simple and basic. What happens when we get some additional requirements, right? Our client comes to us and says, okay, actually, we also need to be able to delegate these tasks. We want to capture some additional information between the approvals. We need to enable auditing. We need to do rework. So we need to be able to send it back to previous steps. And we need to be able to put in exceptions to the process. How is it that we do all of that? So delegation, okay, like we can send the approval to a group rather than an individual. Auditing, we can add an auditing list and patch into that as well as our detail SharePoint list. The additional information and the process exceptions, well, our nice simple linear workflow, we're going to have to break into multiple workflows now because we can't wait for an approval before we move on to the next thing, right? Rework, sure, we can come up with something around that. Right, so what we'll end up with is now our triggers when an item is created or modified, and we can have conditions based on that, depending on what's changed, the different one will trigger. Then we can do our approval, and we'll still use our out-of-the-box approval action. Then we have another one, right, to trigger people to capture information, and we can deep link them into the Power App. We have another one for a second approval. We have another one for our final notification. We have another one for a first exception, a second exception, third, fourth, fifth. We get a whole bunch of different workflows. So now our nice simple workflow has turned into a whole list of components. We've got our list item, we've got our audit list, we've got our Power App, maybe two Power Apps or one with two screens, so our item and our information capture, and then we have all these different flows. So it gets complicated in a hurry as soon as we want to change it. If we didn't build it in a linear way, right? If we built it in parallel, it would work a lot easier. So we're going to take the same case study. We've got a user capturing information that goes through a two-step approval process. If we're not building it in a linear way, first we have our trigger. And I personally would trigger this through Power Apps. So we have more control out of it. Rather than on item creation, we trigger it explicitly from Power Apps. We then can run a switch in our flow based on the workflow status. That can do our first approval and our second approval. Again, I would not use the out-of-the-box approval mechanism in this. I would manually control that task in the Power App. And then we have our notification, Teams, emails, whatever the case is. Right? So our solution components are a little bit more complicated now than they were in a linear one. We have our list for our item detail. We then have a list of tasks so that we can control it manually within the Power App. And our Power App is more complicated. We have both our item capture and our task control having to do that. And we still only have that one flow for approval. So it is more complicated to build it like this than in just a linear path, right? But once we've done that, if we get additional requirements, it's a lot easier to deal with. Our delegation, our auditing, and rework is already done because we've got that manual task control. It's either already there or it's very easy to add in. And our additional information capture and our process exceptions just become additional branches within our already existing workflow. So we've got our trigger and our switch, which does the different things, and then we can just add on another branch for our capture. And then we can add on additional branches for each of the exceptions. It becomes a lot easier to maintain. Our solution components then are still exactly the same. We still have our list for item detail. We have our list of tasks, which acts as our audit. We have our Power App, which is doing our item capture and task control. And we have our flow for the approvals. And that covers everything. So when we have more requirements, it is a lot easier to maintain moving forward and add additional solutions to it. So when we are considering building our workflows, we should use considered design and architecture. Think about the user experience, the future expansion available to us, and what it's going to be like for support and troubleshooting in future. So yes, while it is easy in order to build it in a linear fashion, we're going to hobble ourselves in the future when we have to go back and make adjustments and add in additional functionality. If you've got any questions or comments, or you want to have a discussion, please leave a comment below this video, or hit me up on LinkedIn or my blog and leave a comment, and we can always chat about it. Thanks.